Hello, and welcome to Adventures in Mysticism. I am Leah Grant, and I am joined today by VerdarLuz. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you did, VerdarLuz.
VerdarLuz. Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to have you here today. Would you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Wow. Well, yeah, I guess professionally I'm a life and business coach. I help entrepreneurs, families, couples, and individuals grow their businesses and connect deeper with their souls through astrology and human design and numerology, as well as shamanic work, regression therapy, breath work, and ceremonial work. I'm also a musician and compose in a number of genres with classical guitar and ambient music for sound healing and meditation. And I do a lot of visual work with photography as well. So I got my hands in a lot of different areas. So yeah,
You're playing in your multidimensionality. That's the
that's
beauty
it.
of it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're like,
And maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that. I just recently learned about a concept called soul layering, and I really was resonant with what I learned about that. So that could be interesting to discuss for a bit today.
well, today or possibly at Spiritually Architect the Future,
Absolutely, yeah.
where you are going to be one of our divine presenters at the event taking place on March 24th and 25th in 2022. Fantastic.
Awesome.
So let's kind of just dive in. When was your first supernatural, paranormal, or galactic experience?
Well, you know, I would say that synchronicity is the word I would use to describe kind of all of those, right? Like meaningful coincidence that is an awakening, is a prying back of the veil, and an opening to the multidimensionality of existence. Um, and there's been so many of those in my life, but the first one, um, the first experience that I had was when I was 17, and I was on a retreat in high school for senior year, and it happened to be called Kairos, which you may know, the audience does, is a word that means sort of the auspicious moment or the opportune moment.
Mhm.
Um, and the first night I was there, I started getting these stabbing pains in my chest, like like I was being stabbed again and again and again right after dinner, and I couldn't catch my breath. It was like the wind getting knocked out of me again and again and again. So the pain and the wind getting knocked out, it was extremely intense, and I felt like I was getting pretty close to death. If you can't breathe and you're in that kind of pain. I happened to go to a Jesuit high school, so I had some priests around me, and I was kind of like laying in bed, kind of feeling like the last rites were going to be given to me. If you know, that's the last sacrament in Catholicism. And yeah, so I remember just being on this edge and praying, and um, the ambulance came, and they actually took my oxygen levels and said I was fine. I couldn't breathe, so I got taken to the hospital, and they were giving me oxygen. And they did some X-rays and discovered that in that moment I had collapsed my right lung
Wow.
spontaneously. It's called spontaneous pneumothorax. Happens to one in every, say, 250,000, usually males between about 17 and 30 years old. And I was in the hospital for about 10 days, and because of that experience, I had every person I knew and friends and partners and previous partners and all my family come and visit me, and it was this outpouring of love and compassion, and it was such a gift, even though I was very young and kind of just in sort of shock with everything going on. I had a tube inside of my lung draining fluid for 10 days, and the lung sometimes repairs itself, and we don't even know it collapses. But this time it didn't happen. So I was very lucky because I had a new surgery at the time with a doctor who had kind of developed this, and it was laparoscopic, so it involved the cameras, and we were able to staple my lung back together. So it wouldn't happen on its own again. So that moment, Kairos, the auspicious moment, this is actually the seed of my second book, which is about Chiron, the wounded healer. And I really felt in that moment that a lot of my spirit guides and my work, my soul work came into me, which is, I'm a Gemini rising in astrology, and Gemini is the messenger, the spirit of communication. And I work with the bird totems quite a bit. So I felt in that moment, the first bird totem that came to me was the crane that I worked with for a number of years. And then it's really over the last, about 15 years become very strongly aligned with the owl as well as the hawk, the spirit of Horus, very strong, and Athena. But I perform as CelestiOwl. I felt like in that moment, these energies were entering me, but it got deeper. this the day after Christmas. So this was in November. Day after Christmas that year, 6 weeks later, I went for my checkup, and I was in the doctor's office, and I'd already gotten an X-ray, and I started to feel the same pain in my chest, but it was coming from the backside. So like getting stabbed in the back, couldn't catch the breath. It's the same feeling. It's very distinct. And the doctor came in, and I was like mouthing to him, "I think it's happening again," and he was like already telling me that everything looked good in the X-ray, and we should, everything was going in according to plan. And as soon as I said that, he said, "Go get another X-ray." And literally, I'd just gotten one. I came back into the doctor's office. He looked at the new X-ray. My other lung collapsed.
Wow.
While I was in the doctor's office. And that was the first moment of synchronicity in my life, where it was too crazy, like too weird. And it was fortunate, because then I went to the hospital right away. We knew the other lung had collapsed because it was weaker and had to compensate for the previous one. And that can typically happen when you collapse one lung. The other will, often be weaker and collapse. So I was in the hospital again, not as long, but it was very striking at the age of 17 to have both of my lungs collapse. And symbolically, as I studied shamanism more, I realized that this was like a shamanic initiation, and again with the totem spirits coming in, and that this would probably have been, like, because I survived, like a sign to my culture, my village, my tradition, that I would be chosen as a shaman of the community. And I realized that in my mid-20s, as I started studying the Mayan calendar, which also brought a lot of synchronicities in my life and brought me into the role of an astrologer. But I started to realize that this, the work I started to do with entheogens or psychedelics and qigong and breath work was all part of this shamanic path. And again, the breath and working with medicines that I inhale and help other people through was part of this path. And it came through early experience of collapsing my lungs. So that was pretty strong, and there's others, but
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it also sounds like, with the breath is chi, right? It's our life force. And
right,
so to have that life force like taken away, given back, then start to be taken away again, it's almost like this sort of like, hey, are you listening?
yeah, yeah, and
And the value of life, the value of that breath.
yeah, and it almost feels like, like I lived fairly sheltered and fairly easy upbringing, and middle class America, but after that kind of experience, um, it was a definite wake up call, and it took me on my path of saying, yes to life, seizing the day, and now traveling and living in, 44 countries, and doing things that I've done a lot of, like extreme sports, and jumped out of planes, or gondolas, and bungee jumped, and been diving a lot, and done things that actually, like, if I hadn't had that surgery, like, I couldn't do. Like, just 5 years before, if that had happened, I wouldn't have been able to go dive, scuba diving, or do some of the things that I've done now. And I took it as a kind of life is precious, and so yeah, it was really a gift, and that's part of why I wrote my second book. Was it's a little bit about that, but it's about we all have these these wounds or these experiences that could be victimizing on one level if we perceive it that way, or we could perceive it as the higher gift, the higher service, the higher calling, and and use it to support the planet and step into our sacred work.
Right. And now the name of that second book again was?
It's called Aquarius Dawns, the Shamanic Artist and the Rise of the Wounded Healer.
Okay, so that's a different one than the one you mentioned earlier.
No, this is the second book. The first book is called Codex of the Soul, Astrology, Archetypes, and Your Sacred Blueprint, which is, but they're both on Amazon. But yeah, I have those two books. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So you mentioned at the end of your other story that you have many more stories. So what would you consider the most impactful or kind of extraordinary supernatural, paranormal, or kind of galactic experience that you've had?
Well, it's difficult to rate them. I mean, this experience, these two are, I wouldn't call them galactic, but in terms of the power in my life. And travel's been very important for me, and the synchronicities involved in travel. But I have worked a lot with various plant medicines, and I work with DMT, both NN-DMT and 5-MeO-DMT, and I've worked with the mushroom quite a bit. And there have been a number of experiences with those medicines where I've definitely been with other species, other star systems. I've traveled very much multidimensionally, and it's quite ineffable. It's quite difficult to talk much about them, but I have, I do have a very strong connection. Yeah, I can share this story. It's quite life-changing. In 2012, I was finishing my second book, and at that time I was doing a lot of work with the mushroom, and on that ceremony I would often channel, and I worked very deeply, and I still do, with the spirit of Quetzalcoatl, or Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, which I have on my arm tattooed. I was praying about where I was going to be for the end of the Mayan calendar, and this is very important to me because the Mayans and an early trip to Guatemala and a lot of factors actually took me on the path of becoming an astrologer. So I had considered going to Chichen Itza, which is the temple dedicated to the feathered serpent Kukulkan, for this big celebration. But I was also considering going to Egypt, and I was really working deeply with Quetzalcoatl, and I mean, the first times that this was happening that year these were pretty strong. Like the sound of Quetzalcoatl would come through my voice, and then I would know that energy was starting to come through, and there was a very direct message about going to Chichen Itza. And what we did was we went on we went ceremonially there was a group of maybe 150, 200 people that were there to celebrate the end of the calendar, the beginning, and there was workshops, festival. But we got up very early in the morning so we could meet right on the moment of the solstice, winter solstice. And we all walked with white on and candles in our hand. We entered the temples and prayed at the pyramids. It was a beautiful, exquisite celebration. And then I walked over to under the astronomical observatory there, the ancient observatory, and I met another astrologer there named Carmen. So we're talking under the astronomical observatory, and then he's with this girl, and she and I hug each other. She's like, "Oh wow, I just saw these rainbows," and you know, I was like smiling, and she's like, "It could also be because I'm on acid." and we ended up hanging out, the three of us, you know, all day. But it was right under the astronomical observatory, end of the calendar, mine, you know, 2020, 12, 21, 2012, and she became an extremely important partner in my life. And we did a hand fasting ceremony. We lived together for a year and 3 months. Our families really connected. It was a very, very significant passage in my life. And you know, the message was from Quetzalcoatl to go there and go to the pyramid, and it was on that day, and it was a really, you know, beautiful, and I would say quite galactic moment, um, you know, and then yeah, just yeah, again on various medicines, I've been with, you know, different intergalactic beings, interdimensional beings, um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
often distinguish the sort of supernatural with kind of what you're talking about, the shamanic events, those types of things. The paranormal is more kind of the ghosts and, you know, having things move in your area, working with the elementals.
Definitely. Well,
And the
I could.
galactics are when we actually do that connection with,
Hmm,
I would say, the starseed families, which I know you're doing some work with that as well.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, so what would you like me to?
Do you have a story of connecting with your star family that you'd like to share?
Well, it's funny because I don't have it right in front of me, but I do have my first book. I did self-publishing, and then it got picked up by a publisher. But the company, or the cover, I made the cover, and it's the Pleiades. But I turned the Pleiades this vertical way, which we don't often see it, and then I aligned it with the chakra system.
Mm.
And as soon as I first learned about the Palladian teachings, like some of the early like Barbara Marciniak work and Barbara Hand Cloud, like I really felt like I was from there. Just the love vibration, the heart vibration, the creative energies, and so, you know, I've worked with the Palladian energies quite a bit in my life, and I continue to very strongly right now. And I moved to Taos, New Mexico recently, and I just had this experience the first week here, being out under the stars and praying with the Pleiades and with Sirius, the two kind of systems I feel most strongly aligned with. And I've seen multiple craft and flying, shooting stars, like in my prayers,
Mm.
asking for guidance. And I've definitely seen numbers of craft in my life,
Mm.
in different places, Guatemala, Asheville, here, many places. Um,
Have they all looked the same?
no, I mean, I've I've seen more like hoverings, you know, and then like disappearances.
Mm.
Not as many like balls of light necessarily, but I have seen that once before. I I feel it's a remembrance, it's a reconnection, like kindred, you know, rekindred connection. It's a like, yeah, stay focused, stay present, keep the vibration high. I guess, you know, this is quite important. The thing that I've experienced most in my life that's paranormal and uh, quite intense, and I still experience it to this day, is sleep paralysis.
Mm.
And since I was about 19, I've experienced sleep paralysis, and so
Can
that's
you share for anybody
yeah,
listening that may not know what that is?
for sure. Yeah, it's when you kind of wake up, but you're not fully awake. You can't move your body, but you're aware of the environment you're in, and often there is a sense of either a presence there. You know, some people have a visual presence, some people have a tactile, some people have an audio. I'm often in an audio space. I'm quite clairaudient, and I make a lot of music, so it makes a lot of sense. I have definitely also had the others. I've had one kind of visual, dark, kind of blobbish type of energy, but I felt the energy a lot more. Like I've been in that paralysis state, and I could feel this dark presence here, and I was pushing the energy down with my hand, but my hand wasn't moving,
Mm.
right? And I mean, when I was in my 1920, I could I could have all kinds of sensation, and I could be touching my own body, and I'm seeing that I'm not moving my body, but I'm feeling that I'm touching my body.
Right.
And so I've kind of tuned that into being in the astral body, and being on the astral cord. But I would say that this has been one of the most metaphysically challenging experiences for me, because I've mostly felt these energies to be quite dark
Mm.
and invasive, to the point where like I've had like laser surgery going on in my neck,
Mm.
which happens to be the area where I hold a lot of tension and pain, and probably past life wounding as well, that I've processed. So so yeah, and I've done various tactics during that, and this might be helpful for people listening, because a lot of people do experience this. They don't talk about it, or they don't know a reference for it. But it's I've studied it a lot. There is a book on it now. It came out about 10 years ago. It's cross-cultural. It's cross-historical. In indigenous cultures, they talk about this spirit. Like in Brazil, they talk about this. In England in the 1800s, it was called the hag phenomena, where there was a hag on your chest and you can feel this presence pushing you down. And I felt that.
Mm.
Um, so these could be earthbound spirits, spirits that never left the earth plane, right? They got so attached to their physical body. And my first past life regression teacher, she worked very deeply with earthbound spirits. So I learned, quite a bit about them through her. Uh, but what I've done in that space is a few things. Is if I feel that presence, I've gone the whole gamut of like I don't allow this, like very like declaring boundaries, and then still there's nothing I can do. To like, who are you? What do you want? Like I'm coming from peace. I'm coming from love. I'm sending you love. I've sent them on their way. I've tried to
Do
liberate
you
the
get
thing.
answers when you ask those questions?
No, no, and that's what's always been frustrating, because I've always felt like if it was a benevolent energy, then then there would be some kind of response,
Mm.
and there wouldn't be like the sense of invasion. Now, this is kind of interesting because from the research I've done, and probably you and some listeners as well, like this is quite similar, right, to a lot of abduction types of experiences, especially with some stories of the Greys or the Zeta Reticulis. Now, the more you study that civilization, you kind of learn that their history was kind of you know um, becoming so advanced technologically, that they basically supplanted their emotional bodies. For they kind of gave that up in the quest for like intellectual superiority, you could say,
Right.
or depth. And so
Similar to potentially what would happen to us if we plugged into Neuralink.
could be right, like, and it's happening because the next generation is having a lot of problems with their emotional body. They can't even ask people out or break up a lot of times like in person anymore. They have to do it through text messaging, right? And you
Mm.
see things like with TikTok and some of the media now that is um, really, unfortunately, like, and there's some good things too, but like it's harming a lot of the inner soul and the sort of sensitive, tender parts of the next generations. And so we are in that path, right? And the kids are being raised on the computers and the tech and the phones. So we have to be very careful right now. I talk about this in relation to the shadow of the Aquarian age that's coming in here now, that the over technologization of everything. Um, but as I've sat with that more, I've kind of felt like, okay, maybe that is some, experimentation with those beings and me. Maybe they're actually gifting me something, and they have no way of showing that as a gift. I don't know.
Or
Um,
communicating with you what they're doing.
or it's a test that because it's always in that moment. Can I just surrender? Because I literally can't do anything, right? I can't. And what a great lesson, right? Or maybe it's a different civilization, and it could be the Pleiades or Syrians, but they're seeing, what my fear response is. I don't feel that, but so that's been the great lesson for me, and that experience is about surrender. Um, and that what I if I do feel myself paralyzed, like I kind of wake into that semi state, I try to turn it into a conscious lucid dream. So I'll try to fly, or I'll try to just travel in that space. And this just happened again last week. It happens quite frequently for me. Like at
So
least,
how long might one of these sleep paralysis sessions last?
well, how to know, right? But
Sure.
about 5 minutes, 10 maybe no, not 5 minutes. I'd say maybe a couple minutes,
Okay.
maybe like.
I've had two of those experiences in my life, but that was it.
Oh, okay.
And it was interesting because I knew of it because I have friends who've experienced it like you, but for me it only happened twice, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there was anything in particular that I did besides acknowledge what it was in the moment and go, this is interesting. Okay. I can't move. I'd like to move. And
Yeah, well, I mean, imagine that I'm 43, and this has been happening since I was 19.
yeah,
So I'll share another thing. That it's all sleep related for me, if it's okay.
please. Yes.
Yeah, I would call this very paranormal, and there's actually three experiences, and for me, it's all sleep related. And as an astrologer, I've studied this a lot too, because I do have a lot of planets in the 12th house, which is the realm of sleep, inner work, meditation, dreams. It's the house that was basically, they call it, like in the ancient world, the house of the womb, like it's right before when you were born.
Oh,
And so it kind of is that collective unconscious that seeds through you, past lives, a lot of more mystical and mystifying energies in the 12th house. So my sun is living there, my life force, and my ruling planet Mercury, and which is also communication. Mercury was also the shaman or the psychopomp. So, and then I have Chiron there, which is the wounded healer. So there's a lot of energy that points to this being where I would, you know, get a lot of transmission or connection to the spirit world consistently in my life. So um, every night, and this again has been since again around that college time, 1920. Um, I wake up after 10 minutes. I go to sleep and I basically wake up somewhere between 7 to 12 minutes every night.
hmm.
The only time this might not happen, it might be if like I've gone to bed super, super late, or there's,
And what happens then after you wake up after those?
I have to fall back asleep again. And usually you know, I'll, I'll take a longer time to fall asleep. I've probably lost months and months of my life, like in that, time of like just trying to fall back asleep. Um, but I'm dreaming right away. That doesn't happen. Like
Right.
usually dreaming happens much later in our sleep process.
Yeah,
If
because
I'm
it's part
dreaming,
of the REM cycle, and it usually takes, I think, what is it, 2 to 4 hours to get into REM sleep? Right.
so it's very difficult now for me, but I have sometimes remembered those dreams, but I'm definitely dreaming, and it feels like it often feels like like relieving in that moment, like
Mm.
oh, it feels so good to like drop into that sleep in that moment, but like I know that I'm always dreaming right immediately.
Huh.
So, and that would be the moment when the paralysis would happen.
Okay.
So it's usually like, let's say 90% of the time going to happen right in that first falling asleep.
Mhm.
Also, if I take a nap, that's a much higher probability of the sleep paralysis. Um, so you know that I've seen that very consistently. Um, and then so there's those two, and then part three of the sleep paranormal realms would be this this hasn't well, this did happen recently, a couple weeks ago. This is a little bit more rare, but at least maybe once a month. So I will go to sleep, and and all of a sudden, I will kind of wake or like startle awake with the sense of having the driest throat that you could ever imagine. Like imagine not drinking for 2 weeks in the desert, like parched. And the thought is like I'm going to die. Like
Wow.
I cannot get and I drink water, like I have water with me all the time, and I have it always before bed. So I will have just had water, and so I will get and I've literally like pulled myself out of sleep to like save my life. That's what it feels like to like get water in that
What do
moment.
you think is happening in that?
Well, that one's been extremely challenging, and I the only thing that I've gotten so far is around other lifetimes.
Mm.
And I mean, we could wax very deeply about this for a long time. Is it past? Is it future? Is it parallel? You know, um, and I think there's all of them happening. But I definitely have lifetimes in the desert, definitely in Egypt, definitely Northern Africa, um, Spain. But like Islamic Empire was part of my soul. So I've processed this life where I was carrying some kind of message and literally through like a scroll. And I was traveling across the desert. And I've also been to Turkey and the Silk Road. Like that whole thing is very much in me. So, but the idea of like I'm carrying this thing, I'm alone, I'm
Mm.
young, and but it's like a very important message that I'm supposed to deliver.
Mm.
And
Which could
and
potentially be symbolic as well.
oh, definitely, yeah. And this is something I felt very strong before my first book came out. I mean, that book was written very quickly, and definitely, if you read it, it's like transcribed. That's what I say, like not channeled, but like it
Mm.
was with me for lifetimes. Um, so I'm whole. What I've sat with is like, and maybe this was like pre-Islamic Empire, but it was like probably in these much more wild lands. Anything goes, and yeah, like I'm guarding this, and I'm supposed to stay up like at night, like because of course like there's thieves and like raiders and all this stuff, and I'm just so tired from my travels and from everything that I'm going through, and I fall asleep, right, and I'm right in that in between liminal hypnagogia zone, which is when this thing happens, and sure enough I'm stabbed. And I gasp like this into the
Uh,
desert air. I can't catch my breath, which is my lung collapse,
right, right.
right?
So it's all ties back together.
And then the thought is, I failed my mission. I didn't deliver the message, and I'm dying with that thought. And that's
Mm.
been something I've worked with in my, my regression work and shamanic work, and um,
Yeah, because I can feel how strong that cord is to your commitment to the mission and then the failure of it. It's like you are still carrying that piece of, I don't want to call it guilt because it has a different vibration than that, but there's definitely like a kernel of something that's like within your soul matrix
yes.
that has not released that. And I don't know that it can actually be released on like the physical plane.
Yeah,
That's just my sense of it. Just
something, yeah.
do it. Yeah.
I would love, I'm seeking more of that insight right now with a lot of my teachings that I'm trying to work with and bring through around connecting with our multidimensional nature. That's the new program, the Starseed program coming up, and connecting with our, let's say, interdimensional or intergalactic DNA, Palladian, Sirian, Arcturian, whatever it may be, but actually also connecting with these deeper storylines that live within us, and how the stars and the position of the stars when we were born, there's stories there, there's stories, there's mythologies, there's cultural weavings in
I
those
love
stories.
that. Starries.
Yeah. Yeah, storytelling. I mean, that's what I love doing with clients with the fixed star charts, because what we're doing in astrology is a lot of times it's really just planetology. So we're just working with the planets that travel on the sun's path, which is called the ecliptic. But we have an entire sky. And for most of the history of the world, we worked with the whole sky because we looked at the whole sky.
Mm.
Now today you can do astrology and never look at the sky,
Mm.
right? And but you couldn't be a sage, shaman, seer, stargazer, and ancient astrologer, and not be looking at the entire sky. And you would have a visual experience of a star rising and a planet setting, or that kind of relationship between the highest point in the sky and what was rising or setting. And the Egyptians would say that the stars that were rising or setting before the sun were extremely significant, and they were related to a god's passage either down from the upper worlds to connect with humanity and communicate with humanity, or a god who had died, gone under the visual plane of the earth, and then was resurrected after a few days or a few weeks.
Mm.
And that moment of resurrection was a god being reborn. Now, this is where we get the entire Christian mythos.
It is fascinating you say that, because there is another astrologer who talks about this and, says if you go back and look at some of the actual older paintings of, baby Jesus,
Yeah.
there's crafts in the background, and that the Son of God is not like, wasn't a person, it was the Son.
Yes, absolutely. And we see that, of course, in all the traditions that you know, the sun um, is always this god, but its story is its cartography is mapped into the wheel of the year, and
Mm.
this is the sacredness behind what we call astrotheology, which is basically like the study of like how the stars and planets, sun and moon, and are all like have been sort of like the voice of God, the voice of the divine,
Mm.
for millennia across cultures. And the oldest and most universal religion, if we want to call it that, is astrology. It's
Mm.
astrotheology.
Yeah, and I know a lot of religions would take offense to that
But look at
statement,
the symbol for
right?
Islam. Look at the symbol for Islam. It's the moon and the star.
Mm.
And there's quotes throughout the Quran. There's quotes throughout the Bible. The Genesis is filled with quotes. God gave the signs in the heavens and the firmaments for man, and the sun and the moon, and the rhythms of the sun and the moon to guide man. It's literally astrology. The book of Job speaks about binding the Pleiades and Orion. So I mean, it's all there, Yeah, I'm going to be teaching about that in this training, but also in the upcoming class. And it's my favorite topic, right? Is how all of that, um, because I was raised Christian, and then I learned, like um, all of how all of these symbols of Christ's life and the holidays, the holy days, and the idea of the sun dying and being reborn after 3 days, which is exactly what happens, right? At the winter solstice, the sun stops moving, goes into the tomb, and then after 3 days begins rising again towards the summer solstice.
Right, which is
So
interestingly enough, that's like the 21st is the winter solstice, and then you've got, Jesus's birthday on the 25th, which would be 4 days, but
yeah, but it was never that before. It was that because of Mithras, who
hmm,
was the most popular Roman deity at the time, who was a solar god. Mithraism was all about, um, it was actually an astral religion, and the initiates would go through planetary initiations in these caves. We have Mithraeum, these caves all over the ancient world. They're in Germany, they're in Greece, they're in Rome, or in Italy. It was a major religion of the Roman soldiers. And
yeah, so you have so much amazing knowledge. I've been to several of your classes, and I always love it, which was one of the reasons I wanted to bring you in for this audience as well as for the Spiritually Architect the Future audience. So on Spiritually Architect the Future, you're going to be talking about constellation is your topic. And so you're going to share with us what's going on with the stars and the planets right now and how that's influencing all of the events that we're seeing in the world today.
Yeah, definitely, and how each of us, can embody our star codes, our soul codes, and that's the gift of you know astrology. It's the gift of numerology. It's the gift of human design. What I love about these tools, these three are the ones that I work with the deepest, is that you know they're all about that moment when your soul first took its breath, that interface of, the multidimensionality into the third dimensional plane. And that's a very significant thing, that moment, that date, time, place you were born. That's a very intentional decision in the soul, right? So it's a little bit different than some other systems, which may be very reflective, but systems where you take like quizzes online or you fill things out, your conscious self is very involved in that, and one day to the next you might have different responses. But when your soul was born in that moment, you can't argue with that in some way, or you can't change that. And so I love working with those tools, and I've just seen so much beautiful reflection with them over the years. And also as a traveler, locational astrology is something that I'm extremely passionate about and feel that the world also really wants to know and integrate into their life. That your soul interfaces with different, vortexes and places on the earth in different ways. And we have tools to show you your particular power places. It might not be like the pyramids of Giza for you, right? Of course, they're strong.
Yeah, and that's the Astro-Locality, where like my perfect place is like somewhere in the middle of the very top of Canada, which is nowhere I'd want to be or live.
Well, no, I mean, perfect place. Like, there's always like the better places for different intentions. And we've probably all felt that, right? If we've lived anywhere else when we were born, or when we traveled somewhere and, just felt a certain energy, and it might be somewhere you don't expect. And that's happened for me a lot in places like in Central Europe, where it was one of my power spots. In the Balkans, I was there this last year and done a lot of teaching and music and things there. And, it wasn't the first place I would think.
Yeah.
So I love helping people see that there is a constellation on the earth of places that can really support you growing to your soul's capacity, or activating certain DNA in you, certain codes in you that where you are right now may not be doing for you. I feel that very strongly right
If
now.
somebody wants to do like a reading with you, where would they go?
So I have the site divine-timing-coaching.com, divine-timing-coaching.com. And there's a number of readings listed there. My webinar classes, trainings I've done are there as well. And the new training, Starseed, is going to be there. And yeah, so that would be.
You want to share a little bit about Starseed?
Yeah, it's being completed, built out right now, and I'm very excited. This is a program that I feel has been it's really been told to me from my star family that this is very important to do, and offer at this time. One of the reasons I'm offering it is because Jupiter and Neptune are coming together in Pisces in April. They're getting closer and closer. This is a transit that happens about every 13 years, but not in Pisces, not in the sign of mystical union, of spiritual, opening. And this can be such a powerful transit for connecting with our celestial families and for unifying the grid on the planet as well. So the program is going to be likely done in a number of activations. So what we want to do is have, for instance, we'll start with Orion, and we'll have 2 classes dedicated to the Orion activation, and then we'll move to the Palladian activation. And there will be a class that's dedicated more to some of the teachings around that star system. But these teachings will come from various pathways. So there'll be mythology, cross-cultural, also indigenous wisdom about that star system or star. Then there'll be actual astronomy associated with it. So with Orion, we'll be talking about the nebula, because there's many nebula there, including the Orion Nebula, where the Mayans say that we actually came from. And so we'll learn about the nebula and the majesty of that. So there'll be some astronomical components. In other classes, there'll be learning about the spectra of stars, like the different brightness, and how that can actually reflect, if we want to anthropomorphize stars, some of the kind of personality of these stars, or like the medicine or the teaching of the stars, based on their brightness, based on their age. And this is some really fascinating territory to play with. Then what we're going to do is have a class very dedicated to experiential processes. So we'll be doing meditations, we'll be doing activations, we'll be doing qigong and dance, doing breath work and writing exercises to open our own channels and actually, connect with that star system, that star family, and allow that medicine now to come through. Like what can each one of us receive, and then offer that to our communities, to our tribe, to the world right now, because they're waiting for us. Like they're waiting for us to just create the space and time to be received,
Yeah,
So
I feel that.
yeah.
I definitely feel that. I've gotten messages recently about being a galactic ambassador and kind of seeing that sense of connecting, the stars to the earth, and the beings kind of coming back and forth. And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but it's like the seed has been being planted over and over lately. And your program sounds so deep and so rich. I'm thinking is that at the same place that you just gave us, or is there somewhere else people would go to find that?
It's at the same place, and
Okay, great.
it'll be listed under the webinar workshops category. The homepage is actually about Archetypal Business Academy that I facilitate. So that's coaching using astrology and human design and these tools. And then this will be another page there. We're also going to look at the fixed star astrology, so that you can learn how these different stars and the systems are in your own chart. And you may have one of these stars rising or setting, and it's very significant for you. So we're going to get into how you can implement the whole sky into your into your wisdom and your medicine here. So I'm just very excited about this offer right now, and it's
that sounds extraordinary.
Inspiring, yeah.
Yeah. So it just kind of, as we wrap up here, is there any message that you would have for someone who maybe doesn't have somebody to talk to about the experiences that they're going through? Maybe it is the sleep paralysis, maybe it's something else. What would you say to them?
The first thing is allow it to be a creative process for you. So maybe it can come through music, maybe it can come through dance, painting, photography, writing. Let that experience inform some process of you that is a creative process. Some of the best art in the world, right, comes from this. So yeah, music, dance, let it channel through you in some way. And even if there's confusion in that, right, like write about that, just let it come through. And then I would say there's so many communities. You can start to find groups on Facebook. For instance, like the CE5 group is really great for making conscious contact.
And that's Stephen Greer's group?
Yeah. And there's starseed groups. And one of my recommendations, I think it's one of the greatest consciousness sort of platforms right now. It's called Portal to Ascension. And there's days and weeks and months of free material on there with star family, star seeds, teachers, those who are, again, just like you, like they've had these experiences, whatever paranormal or, interdimensional they might be, and they're mapping this territory. And like I was saying about the soul layering, I learned that from a teacher who has a book about walk-ins. And I've been now meditating, like I haven't thought about it really before in that way, but I now am feeling like what happened to me during my lung collapse was probably some kind of walk-in. And this soul overlay is when like an extra dimensional part of yourself or a larger part of your oversoul incarnates into your energy, but there's multiple of that happening. So you
Wow.
have multiple kind of parallel selves incarnating. What happens with the soul overlay is that those different aspects of the soul, of the oversoul, actually come front and center at different parts of different times in your life.
Mm.
And I really feel that. And it really reflects the Gemini rising quality in me. And so that's really helping me be more understanding of myself, because I sometimes struggle with all of the areas that I, you know, play with and work on in my life, that it's like a little too much. And well, maybe there's like, you know, a number of star system DNA going on in me that it need, you
Well,
know,
there's one physical body on this
right.
very dense plane that is holding a spark of spirit that is infinite.
Yeah. We all
So,
have that. Like,
yeah. So I think that once you actually realize that, like, you always feel like you're about to burst, right? I know I've had that experience where it's like I've got so much stuff and it's like, and there's so much more, but there's limits to what I can physically do, you know,
yeah.
because of the limits of time, space, and physicality.
Well, that's why the more we open to multidimensional types of work through dance, breath work, meditation, ceremony, we can actualize these other aspects, you know, and we can transcend those limitations of time and space. And that's why I think this work is going to continue to grow, and why I wanted to offer this program now, to see what we can do when we allow that density to start to, you know, shed a bit. And that is the movement to 5D that a lot of people have been talking about, where we do create more of our own reality and we sort of transcend the heaviness of the 3D. And so I invite everyone to do these practices and to open and to find who you resonate with, and work and play with them.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, it has been a delight to speak with you today, to hear your stories, to hear your wisdom, and to learn about what you have going on. I want to thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, it's been an honor. I've learned a lot about myself as well, so thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for listening to today's episode. And on our next episode, we will have another guest who will be sharing their adventures in mysticism with us. Until then, enjoy the unfolding and embrace the unknown.